The chronological Bible reading for January 3rd is Genesis chapters 8 through 11. If you don't have a copy of the Bible reading plan, you can download this from BibleInOrder.com. It's also in the files section of our Facebook group called The Bible in Order. And what I did was I printed mine on both sides, folded it in half, and it fits very nicely in my Bible. In Genesis chapter 8, we see the flood waters recede, and if we read carefully, there are a lot of similarities between Noah and his sons coming out of the ark and the story of Adam and Eve being placed in the garden. Noah plants a vineyard. That word vineyard could also be translated as garden. God created the Garden of Eden. God took Noah and his sons and their wives out of the ark. God took Eve out of Adam. And it's very interesting as well that the 4 rivers mentioned in the Garden of Eden, which don't really seem to fit. Like, what does that mean? What do they represent? They are tributaries to the ocean. And in a metaphorical or allegorical sense, a river could represent the lines of one's descendants. Chapter 9, verse 1 is interesting. It says, God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. We know that Noah had 3 sons. Was he planning to have more children? It seems as though God commanded him and his sons to be fruitful and multiply. So maybe he was going to have a 4th son or 4th tributary. Just keep that in the back of your mind as you continue reading. Because the next thing we see is that God establishes his permanent covenant with the inhabitants of the earth, saying, I will never do this again. I will never flood the entire earth again as I did this time. And the sign of the covenant will be my rainbow, my bow that I place in the sky. The rainbow that appears in nature that's created by God has 7 colors. 7 represents the completeness, the maturity, the fullness of who God is. It's perfect. Interestingly, the rainbow created by man that represents political or cultural agenda only has 6 colors. 6 is the number of man. Remember, we read in Revelation, if you were with us in December, the number 666 is the number of man, repeated 3 times. The sin of man is neglecting God or rejecting God outright and just focusing on what it is we want to do, what we want to accomplish. That is the height of idolatry. And man is always trying to corrupt what God has done, recreate it for himself, and push God out of the picture. That's what all of these humanistic movements do. They say, oh, we weren't created by God. We evolved from primordial ooze over billions of years. It actually takes a lot more faith to believe that evolution could be true when there is no physical evidence whatsoever to suggest that a creature or a species could jump from one species to the next. Instead, devolution is much more accurate. Our DNA breaks down over time, and that's why birth defects are rampant. But I digress. Now, the next interesting story that we come to is in chapter 9, verse 22. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw his father naked and told his 2 brothers outside. On the surface, that doesn't really make sense that Ham saw Noah naked and that as a result, Noah cursed Ham's son Canaan. But if we understand there's a euphemism being used there, and in the same way we today might say it's raining cats and dogs out there, somebody 2, 3, 4,000 years from now might not understand. They might think we're actually talking about cats and dogs falling out of the sky. In actuality, what was being said there was a euphemism. It was a play on words, and it could have meant 2 things in that culture. It could have been that Ham actually molested sexually his father, or it could be that he castrated his father. Perhaps he was motivated by a desire to ensure that Noah didn't have any more children so that the inheritance wouldn't be split up more than 3 ways. Seems like the spirit of Cain was on Ham there potentially. And maybe as a result of being castrated, Noah wanted to bring vengeance on Ham, but he couldn't on Ham directly because chapter 9, verse 1 says that God blessed Noah and his children. And so as a result of knowing that God had placed his blessing on Ham, he decided to curse Ham's son. Chapter 11 gives us a picture of the Tower of Babel. And once again, we see men trying to do something that God had told them not to do, trying to do things in their own will, by their own power. Let's come together. Let's build a great city. God had said, multiply, fill the earth, spread out, take the land, cultivate it, take care of it, maintain it. And man said, no, let's all live together. Instead of going out on our own physically and depending on God to provide for us, let's congregate together and depend on one another. That's really what cities are. The liberalism of our cities, where people are dependent upon one another, is just a continuation, in a sense, of the Tower of Babel. Certainly not to suggest that everybody who lives in a city is evil or opposed to God, but if you think about it symbolically, in a city, we trade our time for money, we trade our money for other supplies, and we're getting everything that we need and use on a daily basis from the hand of other people. Out in the country, if you're a farmer, a hunter, maybe a little bit of both, you're depending upon the land that God has given us rather than on other people. In chapter 11, verse 4, they said, let's make a name for ourselves. Without really saying it, they were suggesting that they should forget about the name of God. Let's make a name for ourselves, otherwise we'll be scattered throughout the whole earth. God had already said, go and fill the whole earth. So God confused their languages so they wouldn't be able to communicate, and out of not being able to understand one another, they scattered. And today, as we are trying to grow the kingdom of God and unite with other believers and fulfill Jesus' prayer of being unified, we have to overcome the fear of being united with people we don't really understand because of our cultural and language barriers. If we focus on the flesh, we will want to remain divided. But if we are spiritual people, we overcome the flesh and we can fulfill the plan that God has for us. Chapter 11 finishes up giving us the genealogy that goes all the way down to Abram, who we'll pick up with in a couple weeks after we finish the book of Job. As we come to a close today, I just wanted to pray God's blessing over you. Thank you so much for studying the Bible with me, for these conversations that we're having in the Facebook group and in the comments section. Please pray for me as I pray for you. May God bless you. May He fill you with His Spirit. May He give you joy and peace and patience and kindness and gentleness and faithfulness and goodness and self-control. All the fruits of His Spirit, all of God's character attributes, may He cultivate in you. May you have a growing desire to seek Him. And as you seek Him, may you find Him. May God bless you richly. See you tomorrow.